Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. And I am your host, Caleb Nelson. And I have the lovely Janet with me here on the podcast today, my new friend. Janet, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for the invite, Caitlin. This is fantastic. It was wonderful to meet you a couple weeks ago, and I'm looking forward to more. So it's a good fit.
I left that first conversation. I was like, oh, we're friends now. Like, did you ever get that moment where you're like, all right,
Yeah.
I can see like we just clicked right away.
Yeah.
And with that, I start off all my episodes with why I appreciate my guest. And with that, I when I really feel that type of energy of like, well, we're about to like, this is a good start to a friendship here. It's usually because we both felt comfortable being ourselves. And we were just talking before we hopped on here,
Yeah.
like in coaching, we were just saying, like, I used to be very structured. It had to be this certain way. But the longer I get this, like, what you realize, most people just want permission to be themselves. And if you could just be authentic and be calm and loving and kind and curious, which I know you hold space for a lot of very creative people,
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful things come out of people. Everybody has such a unique genius. And I think you bring that energy to the table. And I've really enjoyed just the couple of conversations now we've had. Because I feel like you can help generate that creativity for somebody else. So they might not even see themselves. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And one of the most important things that I think you do for your clients, and I certainly do for mine, is holding space. And sometimes that doesn't look like a lot of work, right? You're just holding space for them to say what they want to say, tell their story. You're listening and just having them be in a safe space that feels kind and feels like it's okay to be vulnerable and all of that. And so sometimes people don't know that it's, work. It's not really, it doesn't feel like work, right? Because it's so natural feeling. And that's when really people open up in all sorts of creative ways. So I love what I do, and it doesn't always feel like work as a result.
Ooh, I think we're gonna have to dive into that a little bit more. Let's even just nail it in order. As you're saying that, I very much valued the that acknowledging that quote unquote holding space with people doesn't look like a lot of work. Until you've been the person holding the space, like to make that look effortless and feel effortless is a lot of work. And I definitely want to get your take on this. To be very good at that is to also mean you know yourself very well. Knowing yourself, you will set up the space, you will set up the environment, or at least you'll put yourself in the environment so that you can best serve that person. And there's a lot of work that goes into just knowing yourself.
True. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that's sort of looking at things from the big picture, right? And people have told me that I have a business hat and a creative hat. And sometimes that's rare, right? You have one or the other, but not both. And so the ability to see the big picture and then also see the connections, right? That can happen. And I don't really have to manipulate those. People sit near each other at a workshop, or they bond in these ways that I just watch, right? And it's so fun to be able to see those things happening, and then, maybe see that there's a musician over here and there's one over here that haven't met, and how can I connect them, sort of organically. I'm seeing it, but I also want them to do it organically, right? And so and having, I've had workshops with people with GEDs and PhDs in the room, and all sorts of things. I love diversity, right? Equity, inclusion, all of that. So I love it when people can be vulnerable in spaces that feel safe, and I try to create safe spaces for people.
Love that. Love that. I mean, ultimately, especially, I think one of the weird phenomena of what you're talking about is that people who think, maybe perhaps on the surface, they think they're that different or they wouldn't get along. As you said, they're
Right.
PhD, same room, but the one common denominator is you. And ultimately, what that is saying is they can see themselves like we're mirrors. I think sometimes it's very different.
So true. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think if we did more of that, Caleb, and, just see ourselves in everyone that we meet, there would be less of what's happening in the world, right? Just see yourself in other people every day. I try to do that, certainly. And it makes a difference. Like what if I were in that position, or what would that feel like? And how are they connected to me somehow? So yeah, that's important.
And, take it even almost like a biblical sense of like love thine enemy. I think people don't realize when they are really hating on somebody, it's real hard to realize you're not that different. In fact, you might be a lot more closely, quote unquote, related to this person. And perhaps if we could acknowledge that and understand that, you'd realize by trying to either metaphorically or literally try to destroy this other person, you realize you're also destroying yourself in the same breath.
Right.
What a difficult concept for us to wrap our heads around, but it's probably highlighting the darkness that we see in ourselves when we feel too insecure to know how to deal with it and show love and kindness towards that.
Right, right. And it's kind of saying how you feel around it. Sometimes people harbor whatever it is they're harboring, and they don't express what they really feel about that. And if that other person knew, maybe there could be more understanding. Like there's like walls that go up, and then there's no sort of softness in between that, right? And so just letting a little bit in is helpful, right?
See, I just love you.
I love you too.
Thanks. Uh, before we go too far off a deep end, you know yourself better than I. So, and share it with the audience. Janet, who are you?
Oh my, that's sort of complex. People always tell me I wear a lot of hats. And I think the main one that I wear that has maybe tentacles coming off it is a, creative hat. And creativity, kindness, integrity are my highest values, right? So that's kind of who I am. And I grew up in Vermont, and I went to UVM. When I graduated, I worked in radio and then film, which brought me to upstate New York. Did that for a little bit, and then pivoted and got into recruiting and staffing, and then pivoted again, and found my passion in entrepreneurship and helping people launch creative businesses. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I've had several businesses of my own. I had a art business called Art and Soul, where I help people get into gallery spaces and private collections and things like that. And now I own a couple companies, a company called Hammock Way of Life, where I want to spend more time in a hammock, and I want to help other people live their dreams, whatever they may be. And so I'm a life coach, help people with career transitions, but also business consulting. And I just wrote my first song, and I have a record label. I collaborated with a couple other people. And I think that's the importance in a lot of what I do is that I love to collaborate. I can't do it alone. I could do it alone, but I think everything I do is more powerful when there are collaborations around creativity. So I run a creativity mashup group, an energy mashup group that we just started, and that's really vibrant. And anyway, so it's all around what can I create today?
Mm. You're the first person who defined themselves by their core values. And I really like that because you don't know this yet. But I assert that if we define ourselves by our core values, that's the most, what's the word? That's authenticity. That is who we are. It's an intrinsic definition as opposed to the external label, which most people are like, well, who are you? Like, oh, mom, dad, or CEO, or
Yeah.
define themselves by an external
Yes.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is that can change.
Right.
Things can change, and inevitably that lends itself to a very fragile identity. It's a very it's not the strength and the stability of defining yourself by your core values is everywhere you go, no matter what hat you put on. As you said, like, I wear a lot of hats, but at the foundation of it, you said that you can express those values in that role, and that is quite resilient.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's really it is powerful. And I have seen I'll give you a couple examples of people sort of listening to their core values. I had one client that the core values shifted, right? As this person aged, she felt like she wanted more stability, right? So even though she was entrepreneurial, and it's a roller coaster ride out here as an entrepreneur, right? But she wanted more stability, and so her core values changed a little bit. But for the most part, her main core values stayed the same. It was just this one that shifted. And I would say the same thing about people that want to um, travel. And there can be competing values, I guess. So I worked with a client one time where it was a mother-daughter team, and they had very different values. The mother wanted to retire; she was willing to put money into the business, but the daughter really wanted her to be part of the business. And uh, one of them wanted to travel, one of them didn't. Sometimes that can work out, right? Sometimes that's really good because one person can go off and do their thing, and the other person can stay stable. But in this case, it didn't work. Right? So it really didn't. Especially when I'm working with partnerships that I think might have competing values. It's really important to define what those are, right? And anything in a marriage, and when you're thinking about who you're going to spend your life with, right? Are your values aligned for the future? And it's so important, the values piece that comes into everything that we do. And so when I'm at a, I like to say yes to a lot of things. And so when I'm at a crossroads and I don't really know, I always come back to my core values, right? And say, does this make sense to me? Right? And take a breath and just listen.
You got to get out of my head. Head for a minute. There you go. Do the same thing. And I just want to share how much I appreciate how you described some of those things. I think what's heartbreaking to me is that not enough people take the time, take the time to define their core values. I think, and correct me if you feel differently, I think I'm going to call it the subconscious resistance to doing that is that they're afraid that everything's going to change, namely the relationships that they are with,
Right.
especially if they have, you know, family time, like a family business
Yeah.
or a marriage or any of those things to say that, because once you see it, you can't see it. You can't unknow
Right. Right. Yeah.
it, and it doesn't align. You know the next step. And I think that's really scary for a lot of people, not realizing like it's going to be a lot less painful if you handle it now.
Right.
Or the inevitable, like if you're already feeling the friction of stuff,
Mhm.
it's not going to get better
Right.
by just keep going that path. It's going to become, there's going to be more friction. It's going to be more painful until you one day realize like it's going to be less painful to go a different direction than to keep going down this path.
Right.
But I love that. I really do.
Yeah, I tell that to entrepreneurs too. It's interesting that you make this thing of putting your two hands together when you made that gesture, because I tell people when they, with a business, it's the same way. If you want a certain location, you're really tied into that location and you keep running into a brick wall, right? Or whatever it is, can you go above it, around it, below it? And if you keep running into those walls, there's solutions to some things, right? But if there's not, then yeah, that's you need to listen to your values or go in a different direction and see what happens there. And you're right, it happens in relationships that just people keep forging forward, and they should maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, my buddy and I, we call it being married to the vehicle. And like, this is the tool. I learned this modality in fitness or in injury management or whatever. It's like, or that was just the tool. And you hear people, they sell it, and you can always see there's like a cult like following around the thing. And that energy is different.
Yeah.
It's effective if it's the right thing at the right time. And of course you believe it's the right thing because it was so structured. It was maybe still like,
Mhm.
but as we talked about, well, what if it doesn't at a certain point that solution no longer worked?
Right. Right.
And were so attached to you had to be that way. Like you feel stuck. You feel stuck. You feel like you're boxed in. You feel like you're suffocating. In a relationship or in a business,
Right.
you can't fully express yourself anymore.
Yeah. Or as an artist, right? So when I used to coach artists a lot, I would always have them take the piece of art that they created and move it as far away from them as they could move it. And then I'd have them put it on the ceiling and on the floor and then look at it like right up close. And the perspective of all of that was very different depending on where it was. And typically they would have an aha moment in that, right? And so I tell my clients too to go out of their way to a different coffee shop on the way to work or just do something different out of that routine of, you might meet someone new or you might, right, find a new opportunity or just get out of that funk that you're in and get out of that stuck space. So those little things can just shift someone in a profound way sometimes.
I really like that idea of the way you said that. I mean, quite literally looking at it from a different angle. We can, it looks so great this way, but sometimes we got to do our due diligence and check a couple other angles and get somebody else's perspective. Oh, very creative way of, go pun intended.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Way of
I'm
looking
working
at
with
art.
photographers right now and they, it's very interesting to work with some of them. They're like, turn this way. And what happens when shadows and your clothes look different when you do this. And so they really see things in a different way. And they're teaching me something about what it means to just move differently and how different photographers see things differently. Right. If they angle things in a new way. So, yeah.
Did you cover core values with your artists?
Yes, core values with the artists and the entrepreneurs that I work with. Absolutely. It's the first thing I start with. And that's what I do in vision boarding as well. I do that piece of it. And I think you had mentioned people don't take the time to think about their values. They also don't take time to think about their visions, right? And so whenever I have people that sit down and do visioning, they're like, wow, I just never took the time to do this. It always surprises me because I live it. So I do vision boards all the time, right? And goals come true as a result of that. But people just don't take the time to really think about the paths that they would like for their future. And so there's something about tying those two together that I think is important. And I always start with yes.
Yeah. I like that. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say you probably agree with me on this one, but
Okay.
I see entrepreneurism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Business often is the creative work. That like a business-minded person's art.
Yeah.
And I know I look at mine the same way. It's so hard to say, but it's almost like it's a living, breathing, eating, sleeping expression of who I am, especially if it's like a personal brand, especially. But
Yeah.
um, I have family that's artists, as you know, but okay,
Yeah.
got like it's such a cool, interesting thing for somebody to say, like, well, this is the foundation from which I'm operating from.
Mhm.
Really cool. And I know, as I've been around a few creatives in my life, like they have an interesting persona. They don't want to feel boxed in. They want to feel like they could be very flowy and
Right.
creative, as whatever that means. But when the mood strikes me and all those different types of things brought up earlier, it's you think of like the classic, almost like the musician or whatever. They're like, I'm this rebel, and I just, it's the middle of the night, and I started recording then, or just all
Right.
that comes from it. So, and when I was hearing you, like, I have like this business brain, and then I have this creative side, like the marrying of those two, because eventually, if you don't make any money, you also can't eat, and then you
Right.
really can't create anything.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy because you need to focus. Like, yeah, artists create when they want to create, right? In the shower, in the car, in the middle of the night, whatever. But when they're really in creative mode, they're really focused. They lose track of all time, right? And so and a lot of times there's multiple ideas coming in at the same time. So what I feel I'm good at is kind of getting them to focus on one, because I think the skills are all there for having that business side, right? Which is more focused. But it's just that there's so many ideas that are coming in all at once that they need to just focus on one. So I think I'm pretty good at helping people do that piece of things. And it's really fun to see somebody when they lose track of time and just come out and create something. And not myself included, like my best work is when I lost track of time and something came out really cool in the end.
That's really cool. I've never had anybody like I formally have coached like artists or creatives just because I don't know why it doesn't, that for some reason just like doesn't register to, I don't even think. Um, I
But when
have,
you're working out, don't you have the same experience? Like when you're working out with a client and things like that, don't you have that same sort of like if someone's really into it and
yeah,
like you're seeing a little bit of a shift in them?
yeah. For me, I mean, I can just hang out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowadays,
Yeah.
I'd say a lot less. It's just, I make people work out a lot less. That which really, I know that sounds almost ridiculous. Like, but isn't that what people do? Like, no.
But yeah, it's sometimes up here, right? Yeah.
Well, there's not really anything I'm telling anybody nowadays that they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I what I'm really appreciate what you're talking about is like 99% of the time I talk about how do you, it's not 99%. 90, most of the thing I talk about is people's relationships. Classic, trainer, therapist.
Yeah.
Um, anybody listening, I'm not a therapist, so remember that. Um, but inevitably, your relationships are where you're spending your time. And where you're spending your time is a reflection of what you currently are prioritizing and valuing the most, which is also an expression of like how much do you value you. And if there's a problem, that's the problem. Like you lose your energy if you're investing time into things that don't align.
Right. Right.
You get more energy when you do the things that you love.
Yeah.
The things where I lost track of time. Well,
Right.
I'm not,
Right.
I could, when I just have somebody just finally like share all their stuff, you're like, they go off and do all the stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a weight gain problem. The weight gain is a symptom of my life is out of alignment.
Right.
And I work with mostly entrepreneurs as well.
Yep. Yeah.
Their creative activity, like they feel like they're losing when they can't be creative there. So that's why I made that association there. But I love what you're saying. And they're probably similar to me. Like there's nothing more frustrating when I don't feel like I can tap into create my creative edge. When
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought here, but it was like so strenuous to get those thoughts to the surface.
Yeah. So you an introvert or an extrovert?
Most people would probably struggle to believe this, but I am more introverted than I am extroverted. It's a mostly learned capacity. So like you have to learn how, like, don't get me wrong. When I'm around my people, really in it, and I will be there. I love my alone time. So introverted extrovert or extroverted introvert, one of those.
Yeah, yeah. I feel the same way. I get my energy when I can refresh on my own and do art or write or whatever it is, right? I'm doing it here. And when I'm out in the world, I can do it. And I seem like an extrovert, same thing, right? And I certainly can do that, but I feel depleted out sometimes when I get back and I need to refresh again. So that's just I think some people go out, right? Extroverts go out and they get energized out there and then they come in and they have energy. So it's a different way of looking at things. But yeah, I'm definitely an introvert that refreshes by, being creative and being on my own to do that piece of things. So yeah.
Well, there is like, for me to clarify, like,
Yeah. Yep.
the co-creating,
Mhm.
that's very
Oh
interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
So I love what you were saying of the collaborative, and I don't think any real creativity is done in isolation anyway.
Right. Right. True.
Because even if it's being inspired by something from generations ago, you're
Mhm.
still like that was somebody else's work, and you, in a maybe spiritual sense, are engaging with that.
Right. Right.
You're invoking some of
Love
that
that. Yeah.
for your own work, whether it's business.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I love being inspired by, yeah, all sorts of different mediums, right? And just my work is three-dimensional, so I can really be inspired. I work with broken musical instrument parts. And the way that started was I was visiting an entrepreneur who had a music shop that they wanted to sell, and went downstairs into the basement, and there were all these broken and sad broken instruments in the basement. And so I decided that I would save them and started creating art out of broken musical instrument parts. So, and it became a thing. So, yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Isn't there like some, well, I can't remember the name for it. It's like a Japanese word for like, or maybe that's with like they fill in the cracks in their certain pottery with gold or something like that. They don't.
You're right. So to let the light through, right? So yeah, it's that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. Tell me some of your experiences of working with like these creatives, just because I'm just deeply fascinated by it, and I think, how do I say this? For a long time, I didn't think I was creative.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people get to a certain point in their life, they're like, I've done my 9 to 5, or I've been running my business a certain way, or I've climbed the corporate ladder, or whatever it is. And I feel like there's something more. There's this calling thing. People who go straight for their creative experience first, it's sometimes like, well, you need to learn how to like create some structure and some organization around that. I'm just always fascinated by both sides of these things. Um, One, to like, how do you finally get some of that creativity out?
Hmm.
So how do you take that creative mind and then like channel it and funnel it so that it can actually, you can have more of those moments where you lose track of time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a couple. So the way I became an artist wasn't the typical, fine art. I didn't learn a lot about technique. I didn't go to school for art. I I took an expressive arts therapy training program for 3 years to become trained as an expressive arts therapist. And in that process, I really fell in love with art. And so it's abstract, the stuff that I do. And what I realized in there is that I let go of a lot of preconceived notions I had around art, right? That it had to be perfect. The first time I created a painting, it was pretty lousy. And the teacher came up and said, "You can paint over it, you know." Oh, ta-da. So that thing of perfection, like I did this one thing and I didn't have to do that again, turned into something beautiful. And if I didn't like that, I could continue to paint over and over and over and over again, right? It depends on what kind of paints you're using, I guess. But so I love that thought. It really helped me let go of that perfectionism, right? And then deeper into the work, one day we had to create something. And at this point, I was creating kind of beautiful things, right? That I really liked or whatever. And he said, "Now destroy it, rip it up." Right. And so we had all created these beautiful pieces. And then he just said, "Destroy them." And it was in the moment kind of just devastating. Right. But then what he said was, "Rebuild something else out of what you just destroyed." And for me, that was, and I ended up creating a film strip out of what I had broken. And at the time I was in, film and video, and it was much more impactfful, the thing that I recreated than the thing that I originally created. Even though I thought that was the thing, this piece that came out of the destruction, right out of the ashes, out of the Phoenix Rising kind of thing, was much more powerful. So and now when I break anything, I'm like, oh, it's create something new, right? When anything breaks, when any part of your life, right, doesn't go right, you're like, okay, what can I create out of what just happened? It was a whole mindset shift for me.
Wow. For the record, that's going to be one of the teasers. Both of those individual reflections, because I think those are two very classic problems, that human problems.
Yeah.
Perfectionism,
Mhm.
one of inability to let go, an attachment with, it's similar to like we were attached to the vehicle, attached to the outcome. Um, well, I can't remember the art form that they make it with sand. I think like monks, they make these beautiful,
like the Zen garden kind of thing. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
and then practices that they'll spend days,
Yeah.
hours, whatever
Yeah.
it is, but
Seen it live before. It's fascinating. Yeah. They had it in Troy several years back. Some monks came and they built, over and over again. They did these pieces and then, let them blow away in the wind.
practice of being, I built this beautiful thing. They're
Yeah.
supposed to destroy it now.
Yeah.
But I think there, what a profound act, because you start to like accept impermanence.
Yeah.
In an interesting way, there's a grieving,
Mhm.
right? Even this thing, you're grieving loss, you're grieving the time you spend.
Yeah.
But I think it also, what I think the greatest analog you said before was, how many times in life did we build something up and it came crumbling down? It didn't work out exactly the way we thought it had to, and it wasn't, the perfect Disney movie ending or whatever.
Right.
How do we bring ourselves back up? And how, not only that, like if we can go through a small practice like that, just like you said it was more impactful the second piece of work that you created from destruction.
Yeah.
How hard is it for us in life to evolve through a challenging, painful experience and keep that hope to be like, but on the other side, actually the gems that I really needed came from this experience. I needed to progress all over again to rebuild what it was actually to be, or what needed to be refined down to, because oftentimes we just have too much shit. We need to reduce it down to its purest essence, and that's more beautiful.
Absolutely.
Hard
Yeah.
to
Yeah. My mom has a favorite song, and I don't remember the title exactly, but one of the lyrics is that storms always pass. She's very positive, and so storms typically pass, right? At a certain time. It's sort of that same model, right? In art form, and oftentimes, right, we learn from our mistakes, right? Edison tried, what was it, 1,200 times before he created some of the things he created, and so I think it's those failures are really important. It's where the power is sometimes.
I really did not have a great appreciation for art when I was younger, and now it's so weird. I was always admirative, like
Okay.
the one thing I built with my father. He was,
Yeah.
maybe I showed you last time.
You did. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah.
I like, for me, it was like, we put pieces, like for me, it was like putting a puzzle together, because it had to have its own beautiful structure already. But for somebody who could just, to me, it was like I watched him make something out of nothing. And
Right.
how do you do that? I'm just so deeply fascinated by that vision. But I guess to the same point you're talking about, and we're to both talk about, like entrepreneurs, what are you creating this vision out of seemingly thin air? Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's that readiness part. Wabi sabi is also a Japanese art of imperfection, right? So, uh, when is an artist finished, or when is a business finished, right? So you're ready to launch. I mean, that's the hardest part, I think, sometimes when an artist wants to put their work out there, they're always tweaking it right to the last minute. And it can be the same with a business. Well, I'm not ready yet. I don't have enough. No time is going to be exactly perfect. I actually learned this from my nephew recently. He just left a job and traveled the world. And he said, no time is ever going to be perfect for that, right? Because you're going to have life in the way of at some point. So I really listen to that and embrace it, and trying to encourage entrepreneurs who don't think they're quite ready to say, are you almost ready? Are you 50% there? Are you 75? And when things change, so will you ever be ready? And that pushes them out of the job where they have secure health insurance, or out of whatever it is that think they're not ready to do, right? And then all of a sudden they find themselves in a place of, oh, okay, I'm ready.
what's been your biggest challenge in entrepreneurship?
Oh, my biggest one, Caleb, I do have one, is getting the word out there. I'm so into the work sometimes, into the which again feels like play to me, that I have a hard time getting the word out to the people that need it the most, right? That see it. I mean, once people work with me, they see it and they'll share with their friends. But I really feel like I need to get the message out more nationally and internationally and all of that. And I don't have a podcast, right? I don't do a blog. I have a hard time with social media. I do social media and I always feel like, oh, I'm out there again. And are people gonna defriend me because I'm talking too much out there? I'm not great at that piece of it. So that's really, like I said, I love doing the work and I love it when people sort of organically come to me and I don't have to chase things. And so I'd love to see more of that happening on really a grand scale, right? Um, so that's
Here's my 2 cents
yeah.
of this. I think should have podcast. And I don't say the I don't say the word should very often, but say anybody who's in the coaching
Mhm.
world. It perhaps you're similar to me. It's like I don't really like making things about me.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy doing my thing.
Yep.
And I like serving people.
Yeah.
Really like though, I really like making other people look good.
Yeah.
Like brings like deep joy to me.
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah. Cheerleader, right? You're like a cheerleader. That's what I have been called before. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But for me,
Mhm.
what I should wind it back up so anybody has ever known. I started this podcast namely because it like I asked myself, and I had lost, for the record, I'd lost my concept of what joy was.
Yeah.
I don't know how I have fun anymore. And I asked myself, like, what would I do for the rest of my life? Anyway, no money, no nothing, just because. Like, I just like talking to people. Fuck it, I might as well push her. At any time that I've felt like bored about podcasts was like when I like lost sight of that.
Yeah.
But like with it as it evolved, especially when I started having guests on, and I mean, I had a friend who helped me start it because like, yeah, I needed that little extra push to get it going. 'Cause like,
Yeah. Sure.
um, like I just enjoy sharing other people's stories. I enjoy that, but especially if you hold space for a lot of creatives,
Mhm.
will end up like I've had people start working with me from the podcast. Is that anybody who's listening who also has some type of coachy thing? I recommend you do the same thing.
Right. Right.
Welcome the people on you would just be friends with and maybe might be a good client, or but you already have clients, just like bring them on and showcase them, show how they are and celebrate them. People pay attention, and especially like those people have friends. Chances are creatives as well who or exist in similar things or want to do similar things. They'll pay attention to that podcast because they're friend.
Right.
Much less than they're going to go listen to some other rando on the internet.
Yeah.
I'll listen to my friend.
Right.
And you realize like the feelings like I have about you, like, oh, I feel this.
Right. Right.
Or, oh, I understand now. Because especially the coaching space, like
Yeah.
coaches are a dime a dozen now. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. And
right,
really,
we're going to be coaches
yeah.
now. We think we're going to be rich and we can just do it. Like, wrong.
Right. Right. I know.
Wrong approach. And
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're in the gift, in the art and the business of serving others, truly,
Mhm.
heart-centered place. And like, how do you describe this? How do you describe holding space and like you're gonna figure it out along the way and being okay with that kind of vague?
Right.
You just hang out with them for an hour and a half or whatever,
Right.
and then you just push record and people go, "Oh, I get it now. I feel safe with this person." Because that's what I keep learning. The more it's all about making people feel safe, but just do it with the people you already love hanging out with and just make them look awesome. Like that's
I love that. I love that. And yeah, I love similar to you. That's why we connect that. Yeah. Hearing stories and telling people stories and elevating people. So
selfishly you get to learn about for free. Like I have people come on, like, it's a good idea. And then I'll go back and I'll edit the podcast. And I'll go over those clips. I'm like, all right, like that's noted. Like, good. I got a little pressure in there. Like, it's cool.
Yeah.
I learn better from like kind of like dissertation kind of style. Like that's how I listen to audiobooks and whatnot. It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder what one of your core values is, because one of mine is also love of learning. And I think it's why I loved the entrepreneur boot camp that I used to run at the chamber so much, that I was constantly learning from all the instructors that came in. I was coordinating the instructors, but I got to listen to everything that they said and just be a sponge for that. And it's where I got all my knowledge about business, right? So it really was, and I continue to be curious. And I think you have to have curiosity when you're doing that, right? Just to be curious about whatever comes in.
Yeah. That was my pitch for you being podcasting.
No, I know. If you think I could do it technically, I might try. I've used it more than one time, so I need to pay attention to it. So yeah.
Don't worry. I'll keep reminding you.
You.
Every cool thing, especially since you hold space for artists, man, you can capture some really beautiful creative things, whether they play music or whatever. Like, I mean, I like those things too. Like, I'd like to see people art. I like to hear people play their music. Like, I'm just a fan because I'm not a great painter, not a great designer. I'm definitely not a great musician. Sure as hell like listening to it. Like,
I have a funny story. This gentleman and his wife are now deceased, but when I first opened my business, I had heard about this artist in Gloversville named Faust. And when I went to visit him, he made things out of wood that he found in his yard, right? So he carved wood, and he did like a self-portrait out of wood where his beard were gloves, because he lived in Gloversville. And we did a trade, and I own that piece now. And anyway, when I went to visit him, he had carved a wooden frog, and he said, I want you to sit on the frog and interview me. And so I sat on a wooden frog, and we had this big conversation the whole time. It was, yeah, that was one of the funny moments, but it was great. I remember it, and he really opened up as a result of my willingness to sit on this frog, and it was just really, really fun. And so those moments with artists are just fun, because I really was immersed in his world, and that's just one experience of several I had with artists who allowed me into their world as they were creating. So yeah, really fun.
Well, I just got to imagine the fact that you're an artist as well. That got to resonate so much. That's so cool.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and he inspired me too. When I left his house, he also gave me, because I worked with broken musical instrument parts. He said, I left you a little instrument near your car, and it was the guts of a piano, which I had never worked with the guts of a piano. I don't think I'd even seen the guts of a piano before. And so I ended up creating this, one of the pieces I'm most proud of. It was this huge peacock, and inside of a piano, there's these little keypads that kind of look like feathers. And so I made peacock feathers out of that, and I used drumsticks and guitar sticks and a lot of other instruments, a ukulele neck. And anyway, but the guts inspired me to create this big piece of peacock, which is, colorful and delightful. And then we had an art show with a bunch of other artists around it. So, but yeah, it's that collaboration piece, right? That someone opens up their world to you and then inspires you to do something else.
Right. But for the record, I got a few creative ideas going around right now.
I love it. Okay.
Ideas, and I've come to learn, and this is why I love collaborating. Or destined something. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm feeling it too. So, yeah.
I am not the best. Like, I'll get an idea, like a seminal idea for a thing, but I have come to learn I am not the executor of said idea.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But I like the ideas of just getting together and co-creating something. It's not about the co-creating of the thing. It's actually the relationship you're building with that person along the way.
Yes.
And it's almost like it's like your version of a mastermind. And when I had the gym, that's why I'm feeling called to have like in-person group, like all the more group stuff again, is like, that was my version of the mastermind.
Mhm.
Not, we're all getting together to work out. Sure.
Yeah.
That's not what creates the actual change. It's the interactions between the people.
Yes.
All that thing is happening.
Yes.
Now, of course, you got to be careful because, like, what are the core values? Are the core values aligned amongst all these people?
Yeah.
As we're
Yeah. Yeah.
especially as the product that attract, like, entrepreneurs have always been kind of the people like that I've worked with. We had more business that would go down in my last gym, like, because I've known you for whatever, we've been working out next to each other 3 months. I feel like your family now and all, and that, like, to me, that's where the magic and the inspiration happens. But you could do what are those, the paint and sip kind of concepts, where like teach somebody how to do some artwork, but like, let's make it this type of persona that's showing up for this therapeutic intervention. Let's see what we're talking about while that's going on. What are the things we might be struggling with? Like all those different types of concepts around perfectionism. Like, how are you going to apply that in your regular life? Or when things go sideways, like, how are you going to recover from that? That's
Right.
what
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and it just like again with one of those things where synchronistically you're making sense to me too because I've been called or pushed or I have co-collaborators that want me to do this thing too. I've been doing some business learning labs, I'm calling them, right? And so and what happens is that creative people show up to them, and so it's not technically business learning labs. It's like we're learning all sorts of things about each other. People are sharing their how they did something and why they did something and where the open vendors are in their world that are really cool to work with. And so all these things happened out of this one workshop. And it's kind of what happens in co-working spaces, right? So like Tech Valley Center of Gravity, where you can make three-dimensional designs and you have engineers that you can collaborate on things with. And there's a lot of, co-working and incubator spaces in the capital region now. And so I do think those spaces make for something really interesting, you know, and creating new things.
I love it. Maybe we'll have an event or something.
I hear you.
I I was talking to my wife the other day. I I've always like, probably, I'd say probably like 70% of my clients throughout my life or my career have always been like women. Usually,
Yeah.
usually mom, always. I have a boys' night on Wednesday night, and I'm like, do I need to have a girls' night and then practically be the only dude at a girls' night? Like, I was thinking of and like bring it all in. My wife's like, that sounds about as common as it always is. Like, you've already been doing that most of your life. Um,
I tell you, when my friend Kevin has that theory, he used to show up at a women's business council and he was the only guy there, right? And so he got all the business. Like the men are brave enough to show up sometimes at those spaces, right? That, they're not exclusive sometimes. So yeah.
my buddy and I, we tend to be the only dudes at all women events. Not because it was planned. I was like, all right, because we're just in our field more.
Evolved maybe, right?
Evolve the right word for it. I always like, and I love it because the most important thing in my life is my wife, and I still remember I went to all women. I have kind of like helped facilitated an all women's kind of. It ended up being all women's. It wasn't exclusively that, but it ended up being more women. At this when it was all women and like one guy kind of virtual and whatever. Um, but the number one thing is like trust in life. I don't have that, and I show up, and I'm the only dude and whatever, and it's just thank God my wife knows like no problem, babe. Like they're the only that just you and me. Good, we're solid. Um, I give her a lot of credit though because I think there's plenty of people out there that are jealous of like I don't know how people function in a relationship like that, but um, yeah, that I think that also creates good balance within like the creative space, like having a masculine and a feminine energy in the same space.
Yeah, I believe that. There's a lot of women's groups out there, and I'm fully on board with them. But in my world, I do like that combination of male and female energy, and some interesting things have come out of that, right? Just sort of um, in a lot of different ways. So I love it. And one of my demographics right now is sort of, and we talked about this, I think, on in our first conversation, men who maybe found themselves at home again during the pandemic, young men who are now outside their parents' basements and getting back in the real world again, right? And sort of, so that's some of the coaching that I've been working with. Whether the parents are saying to me, "Can you get my kid out of the basement?" Right? Or them themselves saying, "I want to be out of my parents' basement, and this is my idea," right? So, but it's helpful sometimes to navigate all that.
What's that movie? What's it called? Failure to Launch?
Failure to launch.
That's what made me think.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm gonna give him a little kick in the butt. Just say, like, come on, get out of there. Get out of the basement. You'll be fine. Fine.
Comfortable there, right?
Well, as you say that, did you ever read the book, The War of Art? I have not read it, but I've heard about it several times, and I'm like, I think I need to read it.
I don't think I have. So yeah, I'll have to look into that.
My general understanding or premise around it is like the kind of the development of the discipline around creative acts.
Yeah.
And that's something we talked a little bit before. What's the artist persona? Like, I just create. I'm very like low with the energy and all that stuff. But sometimes I forget it. Like, no, there is discipline that also creates all this.
Yeah. The artists that I've worked with who are living their art, get up in the morning and treat it like a job, right? They're in the studio, and whether they're just sitting there hoping for an idea, they just get up and they make it happen, right? Whatever it is that the discipline is, and also, put their art wherever they think it might sell. So there's a couple artists locally and now I have someone that she's on her way to Puerto Rico as of yesterday, selling her art, and she's all over the world. Every time I call her, she's somewhere new. And she really made it happen by getting up every day and just doing something, whether it was a good piece of art or not so great. She just got up and created something every single day. And she's becoming more and more known now for her work. So I agree that there's something about that discipline and that is so helpful. And it doesn't have to look so rigid. You can, do things that you love still, right?
What is the resistance to it? What is the resistance to that? And then I guess the secondary part of like, what's the resistance to selling your art?
Yeah. It's a very deep conversation. I just think some people, they have that starving artist mentality. I tried to get people out of that. And in fact, a couple of times I held a workshop, this is years ago, but I had somebody show up who didn't want to sell their art, but showed up at a marketing your art workshop, right? So Mark, why are you here? Like that was like, it's okay that you want to create your art and you don't want to sell it, but why are you at a marketing your art workshop, right? And so, yeah, it's that mentality of I can't sell my art because I have to be, starving to be able to do it. It's not true at all. You don't have to have that mentality, right? There's people out there that like all sorts of art. You just have to find them. And so it really is just, and sometimes just the pressure of creating someone else's vision of art. So if you're doing it commercially, right, it's someone else's idea that they want you to create. And so you're so busy creating other people's art that you can't make space to create your own art. And so I think that sometimes artists fall into that piece. Maybe similar. I don't know if it's the same in the working out world, right? You're so busy focused on other people that you're not paying attention sometimes to your own well-being, right? Maybe I've seen the expression.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people, hey, you want to get out of shape, go open your own gym. Real fast, that'll happen. And it's that, because then you start to realize that, and I'm sure it's the same with what you've seen, is that there's a difference between liking the activity versus making it a business and making it like a professional suit.
Yeah.
And to grapple with that is very difficult, because then you start to go like, you have to question what are your drivers? What are you really motivated by? Is it only about money? Are you allowed to make money? Is it right? If it's something that you have fun doing,
Right.
everybody else can have fun doing it too. They can you know.
So when somebody says you make great cookies or cakes or something, and so they start a business and, as a baker or whatever, and it becomes tedious after a while. If you don't really love baking, if you liked baking it to give it away as gifts to your, family for doing something nice or something, and then, yeah, you find yourself in a business that you're not really passionate about, right? Or take on a family business that you're not passionate about. I've seen a lot of that where, or you're in it just for the money, right? And those are the ones that typically don't last very long.
How do you get somebody back to that who's gone? I mean, I hit my wall. I resented my business, my last one,
Yeah.
and it took a while to come. Like I was burnt out from the fitness industry in general.
Yeah.
This whole thing, me coming back into training people in person, was not a short sight. Like it was a well thought out thing. I've
Mhm.
meditated on this deeply.
Yeah.
How do you help people reclaim that passion and creativity for the work that once like drove them into that space?
Yeah, I think it comes back to driving them what their core values were. I think people lose sight of their core value. I think that they do focus on money and focus on a lot of other things. What people want for your businesses. I can't tell you how many times people tell me what they think I need, right? Or other people that, right, are telling them what they think they need, right? And so sometimes it's valuable and sometimes it's not. And you have to discern what is and what isn't, right? Because it's all about what you want for your business or what your vision is. And I do think people lose sight of it. So it's coming back to that core of why did you start it? Why did what made you happy in the beginning? And where did it go wrong? Like figuring out that path and where it maybe took a wrong turn, right? Bringing them back to that point.
Making me think about, I said should before. You should make a podcast. But I was
Well,
like,
I want to. So, but you see,
ah,
in some regard, if I can figure it out technically, maybe I will.
how non-technical this delivery is right now that I'm doing. I just pushed record on my Zoom. Uh, but another way you could think about it, like, especially if you're welcoming your clients on, like you're showcasing a different version of your art.
Right.
They are, in many ways, your clients are your art. Like they're holding space for them to allow themselves to blossom and bloom.
Right.
All very artsy about it. That their transformation is an art in and of itself because nobody like, and it's very hard for people. Nobody's watching somebody do all the paint, like the brush strokes. Not
Right.
We're not sitting here looking over Bob Ross's shoulder.
Right.
All we're seeing is like, in the fitness world, you're seeing the before and after picture. You're seeing
Sure.
I had nothing in my bank account. Now I bought my house. I got a nice car or whatever the thing is.
Sure.
Very hard for people to be like, well, what were all the brush strokes that went into that? Or like, well, it was a very deeply contextual and, I had to mix these kind of paints here, but showing my very art and painting and all those other things along the way.
Right.
But yeah, that discernment for sure, what you're saying. But that's why I say, when it comes to when I do talk about others doing a podcast, it's probably the only time I say should, because
Right.
I believe so deeply in. I think like somebody like yourself, somebody would I consider you like a heart-centered entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
deeply loves what they do, but also deeply loves the people that they're serving.
Mhm.
And if there is a sense of like an introverted element, it's like I don't necessarily care about being showcased, but I understand like I want to do more of this and help more people. There's this weird balance of how do you
Yeah.
that
The shift that you made for me, Caleb, which I really thank you for, is it's not, it doesn't really have to be about me. I don't want, like, showcasing other people is the important part of a podcast, right? That's what I love. I mean, I'd certainly want to help people grow their businesses. And if I can give tidbits along the way, just like you have today with me, right? Talking about fitness and all that. I think that's an important piece of it too, but it would really be the focus on whoever I'm talking to. So that stood out for me today. Yeah.
I just-
Your work is done.
but yeah, no, man, why do I have it's all from world peace today with one podcast recommendation.
That's great.
let's do this. Let's pivot to the fun question. Let's do this. Now that
Oh, okay.
talked about so far wasn't fun.
Okay.
So we got 3 fun questions.
All right.
My version of trivia, but I'll share the kind of the depths behind it afterwards. But let's start with number 1. I
I'm
don't
on a game show.
hard kind of already know where we're gonna go with some of these, but like when you were younger, like a kid
Yeah.
or teenager,
Yeah.
what sports or creative activities did you do? Did you participate in? And how did you play them? What games did you play and how'd you play?
Interesting. Yeah. So I could go in a lot of different directions here.
All of them if you want.
All right. So I had to stay in recess for a short amount of time when I was in the 3rd grade. So I couldn't go out on the playground and play with other kids. I had a heart murmur and I don't know what, they were afraid of, they went away, but anyway, I had that and I had to stay inside at recess. And so the teacher had me learn to play chess and I got really good at it. And he said, when you can beat me, then you can be the person that plays that everyone else has to beat, and then they can play him. Everybody really wants to play him, but he wouldn't allow that until they kind of beat me to go through to him. And I learned a lot about strategy and different moves and things like that through playing chess and checkers. I think it was a combination of chess and checkers. And so that was one of the things. And I also played piano. I had 2 very different teachers. I had one that taught me chords and one that taught me more classical music. And it was so different. One had a ruler, right, that just a lot of things about like and what was fun and what wasn't, and how I learned in those different environments, right? So that piece of things. And the sport is tennis. And I love tennis. I'm not so crazy about pickleball, but I'm learning. And tennis was great. The only instruction that I remember over and over and over and over again that this guy gave was bend your knees and hit the ball. And whenever I'm struggling in a match, I still hear that in my head, that I'm not bending my knees enough and not hitting the ball enough. And so that those discipline pieces and all of that, I think, is important. And I'm not one who loves a lot of discipline and structure, but now that I'm talking about it, I see that might have been an influence in my early days.
Love your response. I'm going to work from back to front.
Okay.
So this question comes from inspiration. When I was in college, I studied kinesiology.
Oh, yeah.
I studied that it was a big PE school.
Yep.
One of the classes they talked about play, and I kind of poo-pooed it at the time, but namely what they were talking about was the importance of how we play and how we show up when we're a kid, and it ultimately demonstrates like how we do things in life. So what I thought about, what was interesting about the tennis thing,
Yeah.
like bend your knees and hit the ball more.
Right.
I heard, especially with what you've been doing.
Yep.
When you're helping get somebody back to their creativity, thinking about playing, like you have to swing the racket.
Yeah.
What you need to do is strengthen your foundation. So bend your, so get lower, load your longer in that position.
Yeah.
And you gotta play. And
Right.
go.
Right.
Put it out there. That's the work. You have to do it more. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
The chess I thought was interesting as well, in that think about your long-term strategy thinking.
Yeah.
Chess has got a lot of moving pieces. Think about entrepreneurship. Think about different types of art. You got to be able to think multidimensionally and like several moves ahead, which is like time.
And see how they're connected too. The connections piece. This is fascinating. Yeah.
And what was the last one? Come on, Caleb. Come on. You got it in there. It's in your brain.
The piano playing.
Yes. You have both an element of free play and discipline.
Right.
Dichotomy between both those things.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You see the big picture too. I love that piece of it.
Go ahead.
No, I'm back to the kinesiology part that you mentioned. I'm seeing someone tomorrow, and I love to applaud people that are really good. And I don't know if you know Erin Calhoun, but she's amazing. And so if I could do that on this podcast. Um, she's pretty cool. Anyway, yes.
I love I don't know who that is. I might need that person one day in my life to help me out. So yeah, I like making friends.
Good.
That's, and if they're good at what they do, hell yeah.
Nice.
I just think it's cool that, go figure, you're still playing and the same way in your style many moons later.
Right. Yeah, I'd never thought of it that way before. So thank you for making that connection. It makes sense. It makes sense now.
Naturally, I couldn't do a simple question. It had to be creative in its own and fun.
Absolutely. We're gonna get you painting anytime now.
I'm gonna work up. You know what? I'll do some painting. If you teach me to paint, I would let you teach me to do paint and sip.
All right.
Question number 2. Now I know, especially since you're in like film, that kind of did that. You're stranded on a desert island.
Yep.
You get, what's your desert island movie and TV show? So you only get one TV show and one movie for the rest of your life. What you bringing with you?
Oh my goodness.
And why?
Yeah. There's so many to choose from. There's so many to choose from, Gil. This is a very hard question for me. You're gonna have to edit this part out. Thinking of what I have to see. What's the movie with Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Swayze? Ghost. I would think Ghost with me. Yeah, I love Ghost.
About it.
It was part comedy and there was a spirituality aspect to it. I love the love that Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze had together in the movie. And there was art, right? There was sculpture, right? There was pottery in there, right? So it's a combination of just a lot of things that I love. And I believe that there's something that exists beyond this world. So that really validated it for me when I was younger. And I think I can watch that over and over and over again. I already have watched that one over, and I don't know why I can recall the name just yet. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I have watched it. That's probably the movie that I've watched the most over and over and over again. So yeah.
I like that. Do you have it? Or are you good with just that?
Yeah, I in terms of TV shows, I'm going to mention one that I've been watching, a series that I absolutely love right now. It made me cry every day this week. It's called Queer Eye, and they transform people from whatever it is that they are to something else. And I literally cried every episode that I watched, the most recent season. So if I had to watch people making people over and over and over again, that would be a way to connect with people, I guess, and also see how they have transformed people's lives and theories, and some of the things that we talked about today about forgiveness and being real and authentic. So yeah.
I love that. I like that question because I think we realize, another thing I did not give, let's call it visual entertainment, its credit. So I took a film and lit class in high school.
Ah, okay.
And like a royal asshole, I just get a hard time about this. This was theme. You didn't know this. I've never shared this.
Oh, okay. All right.
I actually won 2 superlatives in high school. I won best body.
Okay, nice.
Most changed.
Really?
And most changed. Which is ironic because much of my life has been in the fitness world.
Right.
And half of what pretty much everything I do is about, like, how do you transform and change, help people change. And I've gone through many evolutions in my day.
Yes.
For the record, senior year, at the end of my junior year is when I when I separated from the church and the cult and whatever.
Yep.
I didn't talk a lot before that. And then I opened my mouth and then like words started falling out of my head. during the time I started to get a little brash about it.
Right.
And I had a good relationship with my teacher. I did very well in school, so like I usually could get away. I could get away with a few of these things. Anyway, I just remember I think we were studying Hitchcock, and there was something about the blinds and the shadows going across people's faces, like that's supposed to traps and that motion that's going on in here. I was like, oh my goodness, thinking way too much about this stuff. Like
Sure, sure.
a little bit. But now here's the kicker. That's the same way you're talking about the piano stuff before,
Yeah.
or the bend the knees and the swing through. I'm like,
Yep.
I still think about it. I'll pick up on this. I'll moving like, and that like it's hard right now. I feel this within me, like,
Right, right.
and I think I thought that was really interesting and all that. But yeah, I asked that question, like, what are the things we're bringing out that's it's gonna really exist? That's all we can engage with. Like, what is it gonna represent and showcase what we care about?
Right.
Like, and the things that you clearly, like you just said, like, what do you care about? You care about helping change and transform and help people step into their authentic self. I really enjoyed Queer Eye as well. Like, I learned a few practical things about like fashion, but more deeper things about the evolution. When you think about somebody changing their outfit or their look, it's more about like it's almost a rebrand of themselves.
Right.
Really want to be seen. And you and I both know when you're rebranding yourself as a business or anything, what you're really uncovering is all the insecurities that you have underneath yourself. Otherwise, you would have done it already.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or that the same way it goes with weight loss, same way it goes with the going after the relationships you want.
Yep.
It's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
the ghost one is very cool. It's morality, art, all those things wrapped in one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love them.
Before you ask question 3, I need to plug in here. I realize that I'm losing battery power fast here, and I have a 3 o'clock get on at some point. So anyway.
Okay. Well, see you Sunday, and we are rolling with it, so it don't matter.
Good, good.
Question number 3 then, because I want to
Okay.
be respectful of your time. Question number 3 is, what is your deathbed meal? And who are you sharing it with and why?
You asked some great questions. I want to do who I'm sharing it with first, and I think it's just like I love my family so much, my partner and my family, and I would want to be surrounded by them in the end, right? In some way. Maybe not all in the same room at the same time, which is how my grandmother passed, and it was chaotic. So maybe one at a time, or I don't know what, something like that. But yeah, I love them so much that I would want them there. And in terms of the meal, probably there's so many. I'm trying to think of things that I really, really love locally, or that I've had before. Lorenzo's Pizza in Amsterdam. They have a pistachio pizza out of this world. That's a great ad for them, right?
Promoting, you're very on brand.
I have to promote what I like, right?
I love. So why I asked this question, and I love that you started with who you're sharing it with, but and how you share it. I believe we are going to solve world peace one family dinner at a time.
Yeah.
Because that is where a lot of our relationship stuff came from. And that's a great place to start rectifying those things. And I know in my own life, from where I've gone back to solving the things within my family and building those relationships, I see it reflected in other places in my life, business and otherwise. Secondary part of this, and why I ask it as a deathbed meal thing, is I wrote a speech a few years ago when I officiated my youngest brother's wedding called The Window in the Mirror. And general premise is, I start the thing with, they say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but what if there's something more? The general premise is that we see other people, we think we're looking into them, right? We're looking at through the window into their soul, and we can see them for who they are. I believe it's also a mirror. They're showing us also who we are. And on our deathbed, they represent those who are sharing that with us. Of course, we have the choice. they're representing the highest version of our growth towards our ideal self in this life. So I think the fact that we choose our family and those people, question always reminds me, like, who would I, whenever I think about deathbed stuff, I go, who am I spending it with? That's probably where I should be spending my time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. I love that.
Overarching theme to all three of those questions in terms of love and creativity and connection, whatever. My father, he worked a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
And didn't get to see him a ton, but like I knew he loved him. We didn't say I love you and all that kind of stuff, but now
Yep.
we know.
Yep.
But I always knew I was loved and cared for. Because what we would do every 4 to 6 weeks, he would take me out on a boys' night, and we would go to a place called Sports Authority for the. It's out of business, I think now.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Wander around, talk about my sports, maybe get a sports thing, whatever it was.
Cool.
Grab a bite to eat, and we'd catch a movie together. And that was part of this is my way of kind of sharing that connection and that love with you.
Thank you so much. I love that. My dad also worked a lot when he was younger and also loved us immensely. And he died in 2008. And the last thing that he said to all three of us, because he worked, he literally he was an entrepreneur, and that's where I got my entrepreneurial spirit from. He had a business and then 3 or 4 side businesses, right? But he said in the end that money was not the most important thing, even though he had all these businesses and that's what he worked for. And he, worked hard to acquire all the money. And, but that was not the most important thing. So that, it's, those relationships are important. And I hear that when people talk about their dads and how hard they work for them and stuff. So
love. It's about the love.
Yeah, it's all about love.
Janet, my dear, if somebody's listening and they're like, I need some more of her in my life. I just love her and I want to hang out with her more, especially if I need to launch a new business or I can't seem to get out of my own way and I need to finally make that happen.
Sure.
What is the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Yeah, just go to my website, hammockwaveoflife.com, or Janet Tanguay at hammockwaveoflife.com. Or they can call. You're old fashioned. They call me on the phone. 518-527-6397. Whatever works. But happy to talk to anybody.
You might be the first person that's ever given out their phone.
I know.
I applaud you. I love it. I love it. I love it. Everybody, if you didn't get that, you didn't write it down, don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. So, I just love you tons.
Yeah, I'm really glad we connected, Caleb. I do think we'll do some things in the future here. So, yeah, thanks for being so open.
Pleasure. Final words of wisdom you want to leave our audience with today?
Just that you do have a creative bone in your body, and pay attention to it if it calls you.
Mike Joe.
Job.
I love you tons. I'm excited to see where this friendship goes.
Me too.
For you. And thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts. Which is fun. We just had fun.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work. You're doing good work in the world, my friend.
Right back at you. I'm just on earth.
All right.
Everybody who's listening, go check out Janet. Go connect. You'll be glad you did. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your time, your energy with us today. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.